Hi, guys, and welcome back to Mystic Mamas. I'm your host, Dakota, and today we have a very special guest on the podcast. Her name is Didi. She actually runs a business called Sober Chapters that was created by her own sober chapter, and that is now, her lifelong journey. She's a mindset coach, an embodiment coach, and she's really passionate about all things alcohol-free empowerment. I actually got to meet Didi because we were in the same embodiment coaching certification. And the moment I met her, I just connected with her because she talked about her sober chapter. And I knew immediately I wanted to have her on the podcast. She was so lovely and her story inspired me. And I know it will inspire anyone else who is listening. And yeah, so Didi, you can go ahead and say hello.
Thank you, Dakota. Thank you for that lovely introduction, and thank you for having me on. I felt exactly the same way when we were in our little cohort together, and yeah, I just knew that we sort of got connected for a reason, and here we are. So thank you for having me on your podcast. Yeah, I guess shall I just introduce a little bit about me and kind of how I got to this point, I suppose. So yeah, like you said,
Yes.
I run a business called Sober Chapters, which was formed out of my own sober chapter, which has been just such a journey. I talk a lot. I will try and condense it for you and your listeners. But long story short, I am now living this incredible alcohol-free life. But I was sober curious for years and years. So when I was younger, I was born into a really boozy family and was given my first taste of alcohol at a really young age, and kind of went on to I guess I was the party girl. I absolutely loved it. I had loads of great times in my teens and my 20s. I didn't really feel like it was presenting a problem as such at that point, but I look back now and I was like, wow, there was actually a lot of chaos and a lot of things, that were masked and all of that. But, partied hard, worked harder, all those kind of things. And then I settled down in my late 20s and kind of didn't, drink as much. I recognized alcohol was kind of having quite a negative effect on me the next day by that point. And, I was in this long-term relationship, had a really good career. And so I was trying to be more mindful with my drinking, even back then. And I moved over to Australia with my career that I'd been with for 7 years and with my long-term partner. And I was 32. I thought I had ticked all the boxes that you're meant to tick by that age. And we went over there to live the Australian dream. And I wanted to, have children and all of these things. And sadly, in the first 6 months really of us being there, things just didn't work in the way that I had hoped. My partner didn't settle. He ended up leaving. The career that had taken me out there, they pulled out of Australia. And suddenly these two big anchors that I had always had were gone. And I guess you could say that was my sort of rock bottom moment. And it wasn't that I knowingly turned to alcohol, but what happened was, because I was single and I was the other side of the world, I was trying to make friends, and naturally you connect with alcohol. And then the next day my hangovers were horrific. I had all this shame around being single and starting again, and anxiety was, as I call it, was really presenting itself. And yeah, I ended up spending a lot of time just trying to avoid hangovers, to be honest with you. And then what actually happened was I got really into my fitness, and there's a whole other story around that, because I realized I was masking a lot of insecurities around my appearance and stuff for years. But I got really into fitness, and I had this really strict PT, and he didn't like me drinking at the weekend. So I kind of started to do these detoxes, and I would do a month on, a month off. And when I took the break away from drinking, that was when I suddenly just felt so much more connected. And I started seeing a lot of guidance in the form of numbers. It's really quite funny. I have it in my branding. My number typical is the number 69. And it's just why that number? But it's been mad. And so, yeah, I just felt so much more connected. And I'd also got really into looking for answers, knowing there must be more to life, because I was in that rock bottom stage. This was back in 2018, 2019. And I started, listening to people like Gabby Bernstein. I actually went to a Tony Robbins event. My mind was opening up from like a spiritual perspective. And I suddenly realized that every time I was taking a break from alcohol, like all of these, I guess I was just so much more present, but all of these signs and synchronicities were just so much more available to me. And I was like, wow, there's really something in this. And so I just kept like taking breaks, but going back to drinking, taking breaks, going back to drinking. And again, I could speak about so much stuff because I was single through all this time. But what I really truly realized was that alcohol was keeping me stuck in patterns. And I was learning so much about myself, doing so much inner work. But yeah, even just a couple of glasses of wine was basically giving my ego a gateway to come in and really separate me from who I truly am. And I know we'll go on to talk about so many things, but that's kind of a bit of a nutshell of my story. And then at 38, I realized enough was enough. Like I wanted to go all in for a chapter, go all in on healing like all of my insecurities, facing fears, doing things like this. I couldn't even do podcast interviews 2 years ago. I was so nervous. Became a coach, did all the things, and now I have this business called Sober Chapters where I help other people to experience the same. But I hope that's a bit of a summary for you because, like I say, there's a lot more we could go into.
No, I love that so much. I love your story. It's very inspiring. And I feel like I see so much of myself in you. And like, yeah, you're just a testament to what I hope to achieve one day. Let's go into a little bit about the ego. And guys, just to let you know, as always, I'm going to be open, honest, and vulnerable. And I feel like I've talked about me having a sober, curious mind for a very long time. And so I'm really going to come from a place of asking like, what I want to know and what I think would also like other people who are sober curious would want to know, especially on their spiritual path and spiritual journey. And so I guess the first question I want to ask you is you brought up the ego. And this past weekend, I always go, it's like I stopped drinking. I'll have a couple drinks. It's not like it used to be, right? So when I used to drink, it used to be like blacking out every weekend type of vibe. And now since I became a mother, which truly I feel like being a mother has stopped me from drinking so much and stepping more into my purpose. But mainly, like, it's very crazy because drinking has been something in my spiritual journey from the very beginning that has something I didn't want to be doing anymore. I knew it deep down that like it wasn't something that was helping me. It was keeping me in patterns, keeping me in places that were just not good for me. And so when I became a mother, I truly feel like it was almost like a sign from the universe of like, because it was all unexpected, um, to have the baby. And, me knowing that I wouldn't want to be drinking every weekend once I have a child, like that helped me and has just led so much into like one another. Anyway, all this to say, your ego. Okay. I experienced this with my mom actually last weekend. She we were hanging out and they're very like boozy too. Like I grew up in a household that like constantly drank and views drinking as something you do like every weekend or almost every other day. And so when I'm around my family, not just my mom, it's easy for me to slip into those places again where it's like I commit to myself, okay, I want to do at least 90 days and not drink. And then I see my family and it's like, oh, well, they're drinking and it's fine and I can do it. And why do you feel like the ego comes in and does that to us, specifically around friends and family?
Okay, so I think the ego is always just trying to keep us safe, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's always trying to keep us in our kind of like safe in our comfort zone, which is actually like a really uncomfortable place to be because that's when we feel stuck and it's actually what we want to break out of.
Mm-hmm.
But the ego wants to pull us back into that place, like for sure. And also it likes us drinking. It really likes us drinking because drinking is a way like of us staying in our comfort zone, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there is no way I would have like put the work in to face my fears and continuously step outside of my comfort zone and do these things. Like, I was petrified of being seen, like literally petrified. But because I like took booze completely away, gave me much more power over my ego to keep taking those steps. And don't get me wrong, the ego comes in. But because I have so much clarity, because I don't drink, I can really recognize my ego now and be like, right, that's my ego talking. That's the voice of fear. That's me in that fear state. let's just witness this, observe this, not fall into it, and then stay in my heart, stay as connected to my true self, and know that really what I truly want is to be doing these things, and that it's worth it to step into that fear. So I hope that kind of answers the question. But yeah, our ego wants us to drink. It wants us to keep doing the same things, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Even when you talk about that, it makes me realize that, like, you know, to our ego, we are being seen by our family or loved by our family to drink, right? That's how we grew up. So it's like almost that connection piece.
Mm.
So yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. Well, then in your beginning of your journey, where not beginning, but the ending, where you were finally like cold turkey, you know, I'm not doing this anymore, and you stuck to it. What do you feel like really helped you in those moments?
Yeah, good question. So I think that, like, I say this to everybody, it is a journey. Like, it's a
Hmm.
massive journey. Like, you're clearly on the journey because you've got that nudge and that
Hmm.
intuitive, like, feeling that it's not serving you. I love, by the way, that you mentioned that you feel like being a mother was a gift, and obviously a gift, but even more so with the drinking as well, and like you pulling out of that, because I feel like that's what I like had thought I would have had at that age. And so
Hmm.
I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not settling down in my 30s like I should have been. And so I needed to take charge and pull alcohol away, because otherwise I would have just stayed drinking in my 30s like I did in my 20s. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, like that was a big thing for me. But what was the original question? Sorry, lovely. I just completely went off on a tangent.
No,
I was
girl,
like,
you're good, and it's beautiful. I love it. I asked you kind of what helped you in the beginning, or the journey of you like
yeah.
completely quitting.
Yeah, that's right. So it is a journey, and I think like the breaks, like in and out, they really helped me, because I basically felt what it was like to feel so good without it, right? And then like I'd go
Mm-hmm.
back, and every time it would kind of like, I'd be thinking about how good it was before, but it was the final thing was that I actually just had this deep knowing, like I could see 40 on the horizon, right? And like
Mm-hmm.
that was a big number for me. And like I was still single. I was still entertaining, perhaps guys that I wouldn't entertain like usually, again, like in my right mind. And there was like all these patterns that I was still being stuck in. And I actually had a coach myself as well, who wasn't really like an alcohol free coach necessarily. She's more like a spiritual coach. And she could see that when I was hungover, it was not serving me at all. And basically, it came to the fact that I just had this deep knowing that if I removed alcohol from my life, like everything I ever wanted would come to me. Like it was this just innate knowing, call it intuition, my soul, like whatever it is, but my higher self just knew. And I actually like it just came to me to do the chapter, but I had to do the chapter rather than give up forever, because if I had said, right, I'm not drinking ever again, I wouldn't have done it. And that was the whole concept of it. It was like, right, give myself a chapter till I'm 40, which was 22 months, go all in, because clearly when I'm not drinking, like I just get so much done and I feel so aligned and just trusting. And let's see what happens, right? Let's just keep following the guidance, like just remove it for that space and see what can happen. And it really has completely changed my life. But what I will say to anyone who is sober curious, just immerse yourself into the alcohol free world, like with podcasts, with books, with community, like whatever it might be, and just see what you can do, because trust me, a lot will happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like once I started to learn more about the science behind everything and really deep dive into what alcohol even was, and even into the spiritual realm, I've heard that, like, you know, you call spirits because it, like, you know, brings on demonic, not maybe not demonic, but like very heavy energies that, you know, you wouldn't otherwise be open to, or I'm trying to think word open to in general,
Yeah.
like if you were sober. Yeah, so what do you think about all of that? Do you believe in that?
100 million%. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Gosh, I mean, I could go into a whole thing with this. There's actually a
Go into
book.
it.
There's a book, right? There's a book called So Napoleon Hill, that wrote Think and Grow Rich, he
Uh-huh.
also wrote a book called Outwitting the Devil,
I've heard of
right?
that one. Uh-huh.
Okay. So my spiritual belief, right, I've been on a whole journey with it. I'm not religious in the slightest, like for me personally. However, like randomly I wear a crucifix around my neck because I believe that, you know, Jesus was a son of God and we're all children of God. And for me, he's like a big brother that is just like, you know, chosen love over fear and led the way and all the things, right? So I have been really curious because I felt much more connected to God, which to me is love and being in my heart and that we're all connected, right? And it's beautiful. But I have like read like all these different things and tried to absorb so much stuff because I've seen so much guidance. And this Outwitting the Devil book actually talks about how the one thing that the devil or the darkness or the fear or whatever you want to call it uses, the number one thing that it uses to mess up our minds is cigarettes and alcohol, which is wild, right? And it just makes a lot of sense to me because of the things that I experienced with the way that the darkness came in. And I talked about it like on my podcast with the patterns that come in. Like it was I feel like it's a gateway for darkness because of the way that we feel like the next day. And it, you know, it is a poison. And I don't like to preach about that side of it. And like I didn't give up because it was a poison. That wasn't actually the reason. Like it was more like my mental health and the anxiety and the spiritual side. But since removing it and learning everything that I've learned, like it is a poison. It's the same poison that, you know, you put
Gas.
in in cleaning products, in like
Yeah.
everything. And you've got all these people that are really, really into their health and doing amazing things for themselves, and yet they are still drinking. So it's kind of like, it's a bit of a strange one from that point of view as well. But I think the biggest thing of all, right, is it keeps us small and it keeps us blocked from our intuition. And we are powerful human beings, right? We are capable of so much. And so I really believe, you know, there's something in that too, you know, that it disconnects us because, you know, people don't want us to be as connected as we can be without it.
I think about this all the time. I literally think about this all the time because alcohol really does keep you stuck. It keeps you from growing because if you're doing this every weekend, then you're stuck in the cycle of shame, blame, and self-harm or whatever. Like it's just not conducive to your growth. And I've noticed it more since I became a mother, like I mentioned, because I'm not drinking as much. And now I will say too that I am able to drink more like responsibly. Like beforehand, like I said, I would black out almost every weekend. And now it's like I can have one or two and stop. However, I'm still at this place where it's like one or two. Why am I even having one or two if I'm not blacking out? And I know that's very toxic to think, but it's like, what's the point of me drinking in general? Like there's no point if I'm not feeling buzzed, or if I do feel buzzed after like one or two, but or if like I'm not like, I've always just been in the state of when I'm drinking, I want to continue to drink and I don't know when to stop. And so that's been another thing for me is like not knowing my limits, not knowing when to stop. And yeah, I mean, I'm getting off on a tangent here, but was that something you experienced as well?
Yeah, no, I love it. Yeah, look, I think the justification that I came to in the end with why, because I could go back to one or two, like I could totally go back to one or two, right? Like, you know, I think that's another important part of my message is that you don't need to be a blackout drinker or to have hit rock bottom or anything to want to remove it, right? And certainly not remove it for a chapter. But the reason I don't go back to one or two is because I have felt so many benefits now from like I've got closer and closer and closer to, or like more in tune and more in flow with my higher self, right? And able to connect so deeply that I know just one or two flips me out of my heart space. And I want to be in my heart space as much as I possibly can. Like I do a heart meditation every morning. I get into that love frequency. It's a choice. You know, it really does come down to being in love or being in fear. And I know that alcohol moves me in line with fear. And I know that every day it is a choice, right? And there are going to be times where like I fall into the fear. But when I'm not drinking, I'm able to consciously feel that and know that and bring myself back. And I bring myself back by perhaps doing a meditation, or, you know, like we've learned with all the embodiment, doing like a dance,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it might be, whatever, you know, whatever works for you. But just one or two drinks actually would stop me from being able to do that. Like, it completely disconnects me. And so I'm like, why would I do that? And I think that you are a completely different vibration when you don't drink. Like, your vibration raises and raises and raises and raises, and therefore you attract in, like I say, you're so much clearer as well. And so it becomes too much of a gift to even bother. Like, that's truly how it's got for me now. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you said that it raises higher and higher and higher, because you're so right. It's like I always feel so much better, and which actually leads me into a good question I wanted to ask you is I almost feel so much better when I'm on this like small chapter. I haven't done a lot of chapters. I think the most I've gone is like 50 days, but I've really set out to want to do 90 because I've heard personally that when you do 90, then you're able to really start seeing changes in your life, whether that be your health or outside of you or whatever. Do you feel like the 90 days is a good rule, or yeah, what do you believe on that?
Yeah, I truly believe that it's different for everyone depending on like how
Mm-hmm.
much you're drinking in the first place. Like, so I can only speak from my experience actually with that. So I found, like, depending on how much I've been drinking before. So say like I'd had a few big nights, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, oh no, stop this. I don't want to drink. It makes me feel like crap. Then like I'd feel like really great like the first 30 days, because automatically like it's just, you know, you're feeling
Mm-hmm.
fresh and vibrant and all those things. I always found, like, so I did up to 3 months. That was the most that I did initially with my breaks before. I did up to 3 months, and it was more like, obviously I felt more energy and more empowered, but I did a lot of it for like the wrong reasons in the sober curious years before, where people would like comment that my like skin was amazing and that I looked great, and like obviously like my fitness was, you know, doing really good things. And so it was more for those kind of like reasons initially. um so that was all really good. But like, what I will say is, when I actually did the chapter, 3 months in was the hardest one that I did, going past that 3 month point, because I'd never done it before. Because what I have to say is, things come up, right? It's not all sunshine and roses. Like, some things come up for you to have to heal and work through, and you're like, oh my God, I thought removing booze was the answer. It's not the answer, but what it is, it enables you to really go deep with that inner work,
Mm-hmm.
because it brings all of your insecurities to the surface for you to really face, like, your deepest fears, your insecurities, your patterns, that you're able to like to then work through them and heal them. And that's again another big part of my message. So, in answer to your question, I don't want to put people off, but there's some things that come up, right? But
Mm-hmm.
the power that you have when you start to work through those things, like alcohol
Mm-hmm.
free, instead of going back to your comfort zone and hiding
Yeah.
away from them, you know, and suppressing them and all of that. Because, you know, when we look at it from like a trauma point of view, for example, we've suppressed stuff for years and years and years into our body, and we all know what that does
Mm-hmm.
from like a health perspective, you know, that comes out in ailments later in life and all of these things. So there's another gift that being alcohol free long term really does you for like a chapter, is that you, when you remove it and this stuff comes up to the surface, it's coming up to the surface for you for a reason,
Mm-hmm.
and it's time to work through that. And again, that ends up giving you so much freedom. And I always say, short term pain, long term gain. And it's,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, you just have this knowing to keep going. And I'm sure there's people that are listening now that if this is resonating, they're resonating for a reason, right? Because they were supposed to hear this podcast, they were supposed to potentially embark on this journey. And yeah, I feel that for you too,
Yeah,
in a
literally
big
me.
way.
Literally me. I feel like this is coming at a perfect time because I haven't drank since, my mom came down. And even after that, it was like, no, I mean, I didn't just have one or two either, but it wasn't like I got, blacked out or anything like that. It's like, it's not the same. So it's not the same as it used to be, right? I used to black out, then shame and blame. Now I'm at this point where it's like, I'm not blacking out, but I still have a couple. And when that shame or blame does come up, it's easy for me to come back into my body and redirect, like, hey, everyone's safe, you're safe, everything is good. However, like, I don't even want to be having those thoughts and like feelings just from having a couple of drinks. Like, I know that I truly want to just, take it out of my life. It's been something that has come up for me for a very long time, and something that I wanted to initially say in the beginning of the podcast is like, my dad was an alcoholic. And so growing up with an alcoholic and seeing how that affected my family, he was in and out of jail and things like that. And, that comes with abandonment wounds, just wounds all around for me and my family. And then also like, then he got on this track of being sober. He was sober for a couple of years, and then he got cancer, and then he passed away. And
Oh, God.
so it's a big part of my story. Like, yes, that is his story, but that's still my story too. And like, that's a big reason why I don't want to continue to go down this path. I never want my kid to experience what I experienced. I never want anyone to experience what I experienced. And if I could just be like a light for somebody who is sober curious, or just like you are for me, like it's beautiful. And I really think that you're right with everything that you're saying. We go higher and higher vibrationally wise. We also get more connected to ourselves, more connected to God, more connected to who we are meant to be. And yeah, so thank you so much for this. That goes into my next thing I wanted to ask you. How do you feel like embodiment and sobriety has like gone together? And yeah.
I just want to say thank you for
Yeah.
sharing like all of that as well. And it's yeah, it's a huge thing, and it's clearly something that's been kind of like ticking away at you for a little
Mm-hmm.
while. And I think it's I just want to commend you for listening to it, because that's in itself is what you're doing, right? You're listening to
Mm-hmm.
that soft whisper, that nudge that's like keeps coming back around. Just want to quickly ask you, what do you think is the
Yeah.
biggest thing holding you back from giving it up?
Yeah. My partner, I mean, I could sit here and blame everyone outside sources, right? I could say that, it's um I truly I could blame everyone around me, and that's kind of the direction I want to take. Just like, sometimes my partner has a couple and I'm like, oh, why not just a couple to relax or whatever. And I know it's just me coming from a state of what I'm comfortable with, and I need to learn to stay with that uncomfortableness like you were speaking about. um and yeah, I think it's also a form of what we're taught in society of relaxation, and to bond with other people, and to connect with my family and connect with the people around me. And if I'm not doing it, like, because I get in these states where, like, if I'm not doing it, I don't want to be there. And then it's like, okay, well, if I don't want to be here, then why am I here? And then it's like, it, it just spirals into so much. And I think facing that is scary.
Mm-hmm.
And I think coming to terms with like what's really underneath, I haven't yet done that yet. Maybe in bits and pieces, and I understand and I'm aware. And also, I haven't given myself the space to like fully go sober for a while, other than like I said, the longest time I went was like the 50 days or whatever. And I was really proud of myself. And then, what messed it up? I went to go see my friends back at home where I moved from Dallas, Texas. And then it was like, they were all drinking. And so I was like, you know what? Like, I'll drink too. And then I came home thinking, actually came home really freaking hungover, like the drive home and everything. Just the whole time I'm like, why did I do this? Like, why would I do this? Shaming and blaming myself. And then it was that cycle again. And ever since then, it's been on and off. Like, I've had a couple, maybe every 2 weeks or whatever. I don't know if that answers your question,
No,
but
it does. Yeah, no,
yeah.
absolutely. Like I love like your honesty, like how much self-awareness you have around it. And yeah, gosh, it's an interesting thing. There's so much that I could say on all of that. I'm just thinking like because do you know another thing that's like really quite fascinating is that we're not actually necessarily addicted to the high or the numbing that the alcohol gives us. We're actually more addicted to the come down, right? We're more addicted to that stress that you just mentioned, that beating
Mm-hmm.
yourself up and all of that. Okay.
Yeah.
So like I see this in my clients, right? You'll get to a
Mm-hmm.
point where like everything's really good. Like you're in like 30, 60 days of alcohol free and like you feel amazing. That's the time when you're most likely, we call it a lapse, not relapse, because like it's a lapse where like it's normally shorter and all the things, like you go back and like have a few drinks or whatever it might be. And but that time when you're feeling good is actually like when you're most at risk of having that, because we're wired for stress, right? We're wired to beat ourselves up. Our nervous system craves that. And so when we're feeling really good and like, we're full of oxytocin and all of that, and we're cruising along, suddenly like our body and our cells is like, no. And obviously our ego from that point of view is like, no, hang on a minute. We want to pull you right back down to where you need to be. And that's where you get that voice of like, go on, you'll be fine. Just have like a couple. But then it will come back to you beating yourself up the next day. Like, why did I do this? Self-esteem, self-loathing, whatever it might be, that chatter. And that's the bit that we're actually addicted to, which is wild, right? It is wild. So look, everyone goes through that. But I think, again, like if you say you did like a year, and that's kind of what I say to people, like a sober chapter, like a year is like a really good amount to really embody an alcohol-free life. From a science perspective, you will actually rewire your like reprogram your neural pathways, essentially, from just like continuously creating new habits. Then when it comes to your question about the embodiment stuff, the whole thing, and the reason why I resonated with that certification that we did together, is because like it's all about feeling to heal, essentially, and getting back into our bodies, getting back into our hearts. And alcohol actually keeps us stuck in our head a lot of the time. Again, linked to that next day bit, right? You're in your head, you're disconnected. So can you see, like, it all just links up? Like, it's wild. And I struggle, people, get me on podcasts, and I realize, like, I talk a lot and I go off on tangents because it is all linked. It's linked on a spiritual level. It's linked on a mental level, emotional level, physical level. Like, it's literally all connected. Yes. It really, really is. And, like I say, it all comes down to love and fear. And removing alcohol keeps me in that love space. And drinking keeps me stuck nearer the fear, and I know where I want to be, right? So
yeah, no, I love that. And you're so right. And I feel like the more I've learned about embodiment too, everything started clicking for me. I started to understand more things that I once knew before. And then now you're telling me all this with sobriety, and I've had these thoughts, but have I acted on them or even like asked anyone if they've also had these thoughts? No. So it's almost like you're reaffirming what I've really believed in my heart and what spirit, I'm getting chills on my body, what spirit has like told me. And like, oh, now I want to cry. But like, yeah, I just appreciate you being on the podcast, and literally also I feel like you're coaching me through some things. So thank you for that. I forgot where I was going with that, but yeah, embodiment has been so amazing to get out of your headspace and into your heart. And, maybe the next time that I do feel eager to drink or influenced or whatever word I want to use there, to really go back into my heart space and, check in with myself. I love that you say, heart over fear, or is that what you said? Love over fear.
Yeah, love, like, and breathing love into our fear, but like, staying in that heart space, choosing love, like it's a choice, right? And it's a practice. Something else that I wanted to mention actually when you were just talking then, so I don't know if you've heard of Rebecca Campbell. She's written a book which is called Light is the New Black, and she talks about how we're in this like age of light, obviously the rise of the divine feminine and all of these things, right? And coming back to who we truly are and authenticity and all of that. And I remember reading that book when I was so curious, and that's when it was all starting to come together for me in my mind about the benefits of removing the booze. And it made me realize as well, like, there's this huge shift now, this huge movement when it comes to people removing the booze. And it's like, how interesting that we're moving into this age of light, divine feminine, coming back to who we truly are, authenticity. And there's all these women, incredible women, that are, reassessing this relationship with alcohol, which is the one thing alcohol does. It takes you away from who you truly are. So that, again, is just another thing that just made so much sense to me. So I just wanted to share that too.
No, I love that. And it does make sense. And I have thought about that too, where I feel like we're all rising consciously. And like a part of that is a lot of people are going sober. A lot of people are, dropping things like alcohol and booze. I mean, we're still kind of doing like plant medicine, what is your take on plant medicine actually?
Yeah, so like I'm one of these people that's like whatever works for people, right? I'm
Yeah.
very, very open-minded. Again, I hear and I believe that it's a calling if that's your calling. So
Mhm.
I actually, so I when I said about the insecurities that I had around my appearance, one of the
Mhm.
things that I had was I had a lot of body image issues, and
Mhm.
I would say I was borderline body dysmorphia at one point, and it was when I was hungover that when I looked in the mirror, I couldn't look at myself. And
Mhm.
so when I removed the booze, I thought that it solved all that. And then, as I mentioned, at 3 months, all these kind of like things like insecurities came up for me. And I panicked because suddenly I had like all of this insecurity around my body again. And I was like, oh no, I thought I'd healed this. And I actually Googled, I was in a panic, right? And I Googled what to do for body dysmorphia. I was like, this is. And it came up that mushrooms
Mhm.
mushrooms, psilocybin was one of the things that they recommend. And I was like, that's wild. And so I actually found it was in like the top 10 mental health retreats in the world, a place in Amsterdam. And
Mhm.
I was like, right, I'm going to see, what like this is all about. And so I went. I It was an interesting experience. I don't think it is something that I would personally do again, but it's not my calling, right? And, I had
Mhm.
thought that ayahuasca was calling me. I just think now it's probably not my path, like, especially in line with my personal experience of the sober chapter. But I hear about it loads that people have amazing breakthroughs. And so I think it's whatever you're
Mhm.
personally called to,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Yeah.
What are yours out of interest?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we actually just literally our last two podcast episodes were about our microdosing and macrodosing experiences. So I have done it. Never fully intentional. Well, I guess the microdosing I did do intentionally, but I did take, I think, too much of because there's different like portions of microdosing, So I was taking a point 0.3 where I feel like I should have taken a point 0.1. But Danielle, my co-host, she loves it and she does it and she feels like it's really helpful for her mental health and her growth and everything. And I feel like I could be there if I would have maybe taken the right doses, or maybe it's just not my thing. And that's okay too. Like you were saying,
Yeah.
we do have our own calling. And kind of funny that you mentioned ayahuasca because we talk about that too. But I've had the calling and then I haven't had the calling. And then I've had the calling and then it's like, oh no, now I'm too scared of that. Cause like, yeah, I think those things just really open you up almost like intensely. And I even heard on different podcasts that like maybe too intensely for some people if it's
Yeah,
too
I have
quick, too
heard that too.
fast. Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard that too. And I tell you what, I really do think that we can do it all on our own. Like
Yep.
personally, I really truly
Mm.
believe that. Like that's a
Mm-hmm.
big part of my message too, right? Like it can take some work, it can be scary, but I think you can do it all on your own, and you can access some incredible highs on your
Mm-hmm.
own too. Like absolutely. And I just feel called to mention about my trip to Ibiza for my 40th, which was supposed to be the last weekend of my sober chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I went there to Ibiza with all my old friends and I went to all the clubs, and it is the most naturally high that I have ever felt in my life. And I was in my heart, in that love frequency with the music, everyone around me, it was Ibiza's a party island, right? But it felt magical, like absolutely magical. And it was confirmation to me that I don't ever need to go back. Like if I can go to Ibiza and dance when you're with the right people, with the right music, right energy, you don't need anything outside of yourself. And in fact, I will honestly say the high was bigger than any high that I, had ever had, like in my previous years of partying. So that's another big message of mine. And I've actually I'm going to throw it out there. I've just confirmed that I'm hosting my first retreat
Mm-hmm.
in Ibiza
That's
in
awesome.
Ibiza next year. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
Ah, I'm like, hey, I want to go. I want to
well, yeah, it's
go.
because it's going to be all about heat. Like a lot of it is healing. Like I'm calling
Mm-hmm.
it the perfect blend of party and peace, but it will be more about the peace, the healing, the somatics, the breath work, like all of that stuff. And Ibiza is a magical spiritual island. But of course, then there is the option, like, I'm going to do like ecstatic dance is going to come into it. But like there is a chance to go out to the clubs as well for people that want to and they want to experience that fun without the booze, because it's possible for all of us. It is a
Mm-hmm.
mindset, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
practice. It takes practice, but gosh, if everyone could get to a point where they could all go out wild without booze, like it'd be absolutely a beautiful place, because
Mm-hmm.
it's possible, right? So
Mm-hmm. It is. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because I literally I talked about in the last couple episodes of the podcast too, that like you are the magic and the medicine. Like you don't need anything to take you into that. Like you are already that. And I really talked about like embodiment through that, because I feel like I've had some crazy spiritual experiences with learning the embodiment method that we learned, and just really honing in on like who I am and going into my body and not like running from the emotions that I experience. Because I feel like that all plays a part with everything else in our lives, right? Like even like, what am I feeling right now? Why do I feel like I want to pick up a drink or go hang out with my family and drink with them, or any of those things? It's like if I just tap into the feelings that I'm
yeah,
currently, experiencing, I'll be
yeah,
able to release it, or at least listen to it, and then I
yeah.
won't feel that need to go grab that drink with my family. I can be around them without it. And yeah, somatics is beautiful for it.
You you are spot on with that. I love that you brought that up, because it's like it's creating the awareness first of all, and then sitting with that, getting comfortable sitting with the uncomfortable, which
Mm-hmm.
is a power move, like which will stand you in such good stead for everything. And essentially what it is, it's creating that space, like creating that space. And this is applicable for triggers that come up emotionally in anything, right? But it's creating the space between the trigger and the reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So, whether the reaction is getting a drink, or whether it's like, having a row or whatever it might be, but it's all about creating that space in between. And that space is where so there's things there that you can enhance all the time to keep creating that space. And you know them, you live them, you're doing it all the time. But it's like the connection to self, connection to others, connection to earth, and connection to God, higher power, source, whatever you believe in. And those four things, like the more that we can enhance those things there, those genuine things there, like that's like, yeah,
The power.
the power.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
really feel like this embodiment that we've learned is going to help me, choose differently next time when my family is around or I'm offered it. And now that I'm having this conversation with you, I truly feel like I'm feeling very in my power right now. And I feel like it's going to be easy to say no. And it is easy to say no a lot of the times, but then it's just have those one-offs where it's like, why not have one? Why not? And like, that's the stress. That's the stress
Yeah.
calling me.
There
And,
you
you know,
go. Yeah.
I wanted to touch on that really quick, because we had a whole podcast on that too, how like you can be addicted to stress, but I haven't thought about it hangover wise. Maybe I mentioned it in that episode. I don't remember, but like, yeah, I've definitely thought about it. Like, I watch reality TV, that's stress inducing. Or whatever else, just arguing with your partner or whatever. Right. But it's like, I don't know if I've really thought about the hangover. Like I'm addicted to the hangover, not the
Yeah.
high. Like, I
Hell
love
yeah.
that you put
Yeah.
it that way. That's so eye opening. And that's like, damn, I got some work to do, but
You are on your way though, girl. Honestly, you are awesome. I'm loving it. Loving all your content. Like resonates so much. And yeah,
yeah.
it's cool. I'm excited for both of us with everything that's going on.
Yeah. Speak about that. I know you said your retreat. How else can people find you and everything?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, my Instagram is sober_chapters, which started off, about 18 months ago. I faced my biggest fear, which was showing up on video. Like I say, I had all this
Mm.
insecurity. So that's just grown into, now more about the coaching and the practices and all of that come along with being alcohol free. And then I have my own podcast, which is the Sober
Mm.
Chapters podcast, which you will be coming on soon, I
I would
hope.
love
Yeah.
to.
So I have that as well. So those are the main things. And then I do like the one-on-one coaching. I'm just putting together like a group coaching program that I'm going to be doing as well. Essentially all about coming home to who we truly are and
Mm.
returning to love. Like that's a big part of my message.
I love that.
So yeah, that's going to be coming out. And then yeah, the retreat. And I don't know. I just feel like we haven't really even touched on this, but yeah, I guess it's all linked. But it's like I feel like I'm living the life that I once
Mm.
dreamed of, and removing booze has been a huge part of that. And so it's exciting. And I'm currently in America. I absolutely love this country, and it keeps calling me. And I'm in LA at the moment visiting some clients that I actually have never met in person. So I'm meeting them, and I'm actually going to Joe Dispenza and Lewis House this weekend.
It's gonna be
Yeah,
so
so
amazing.
yeah, so it's really cool. But yeah, you can find me there.
Perfect. We'll link everything down in the show notes below. And the very last question I want to ask you, we haven't really been doing this lately. We're forgetting, but what's a good affirmation for this journey?
Well, I am enough. Just came
Mm,
straight to my mind. I
yeah.
am enough, so I'm going to roll with that. I am
Yeah.
enough, and I don't need, anything outside of myself. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Didi, for coming on and connecting with me and coaching me through this. I really appreciate everything and very grateful for you.
Yeah, really grateful for coming on and having met you, Dakota. You're amazing. You're doing amazing things, and
Mm.
yeah, looking forward to staying connected.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much. Bye,
Thank you.
guys. See you in the next episode. Thank you so much for tuning in.